I thought it would never happen again, a treble in English football, and Guardiola did it in 6 years.
No one remembers the second man that went on the moon.
Manchester United has always been seduced by noise, big personalities, big statements and big moments.
Rolled it into the path of Carrick, who dug one out and put it in the back of the net.
But Michael Carrick's entire career is a warning label against that logic. Because while the spotlight was fixed on the loudest names at West Ham, at England, even at Old Trafford, Carrick kept doing the same quiet thing, controlling games, making chaos feel predictable, and making everyone around him look sharper. Sir Alex Ferguson saw it early. He didn't just sign a midfielder from Spurs, he signed a type, a player he later called a shy boy who needed to be shaken at times, and still trusted to sit at the heart of Manchester United's machine. And here's what makes this story dangerous for modern football narratives. Carrick didn't chase attention. Attention chased him. He was overlooked for England. He lived in the shadows of bigger names. And yet, when United needed steadiness, when they needed calm intelligence in the middle of the storm, Carrick kept reappearing, like the club's internal compass. And by the time we reach the Everton game, the latest proof point, you'll see why this isn't just a nice guy gets a chance story. It's a story about how the United's most faithful student learned the Ferguson code, then applied it under pressure. This is Michael Carrick's journey from shy boy to Manchester United head coach. If you're looking for the moment Michael Carrick became Michael Carrick, it's not a trophy lift at Old Trafford, it's not a Champions League night, it's not even a transfer headline. It starts in Wallsend, a place that doesn't produce footballers by gifting them spotlight. It produces them by demanding they understand the game. Carrick came through Wallsend Boys Club, that famous North Tyneside pipeline where the standard is simple. If you can't think fast, you don't survive. The alumni list tells you what that environment is about. Players like Alan Shearer and Peter Beardsley, built on sharp basics and sharper decisions. And like most kids from there, Carrick had a dream that felt almost automatic. Newcastle United, a local boy, a local club. But football doesn't care about neat stories. Newcastle's pathway wasn't there when he needed it, and instead of waiting for permission, Carrick made the first major adult decision of his life. At 15, he left home and moved to London to join West Ham United's youth setup in 1997, a move that sounds normal when you say it quickly, but is massive when you stop to picture it. A quiet teenager from the northeast, thrown into digs in East London, trying to grow up in fast forward. And here's the detail that matters for this story. When Carrick arrived at West Ham, he wasn't even the player we remember. He arrived as a striker. That part's important because it explains the Carrick mystery later. The calmness, the timing, the way he always seemed to know where the next pass should go before the ball even arrived. For years, he'd been learning the game with a forward's instincts, seeing spaces early, reading defenders, predicting what breaks a shape. Then, a small crisis in a youth match triggers a career-defining switch. West Ham needed a central midfielder, and Carrick was asked to try it. He didn't love it at first, but he agreed. That one decision quietly rewires his entire future, because in midfield, Carrick wasn't built to dominate with force, he was built to dominate with positioning. There's a reason Carrick's early years are described like an education. Even physically, it wasn't smooth. West Ham people remembered him as skinny when he arrived, and then he had a growth spurt that made it worse before it made it better. He outgrew his strength. He had the technique, but for a period he struggled to move like his body belonged to him. That phase matters because it forced him to survive without the things young players usually lean on: speed, power, athletic dominance. Carrick learned to play with angles, to manage energy, to make the game easier by thinking earlier than everyone else. This is where the brain forms. Not flashy, not powerful, but spatially aware. The West Ham Academy at that time was a pressure cooker of talent and attention. People talked about the next big thing constantly, and Carrick was in the mix. In 1998-99, he's part of the West Ham youth team that wins the FA Youth Cup, destroying Coventry City over 2 legs, 9-0 on aggregate, and the club's own retrospectives underline how significant that youth side was for West Ham's modern history. But this is where the pattern begins. Even when Carrick is central to what's happening, he's rarely the headline. The noise often goes to the louder profile, the more obvious star, the players whose game reads well in clips. Carrick's game reads well in results. He breaks into the first team, lives through the harsh end of football reality, relegation in 2003, and here comes the detail that shapes the Ferguson-ready profile. Carrick stays. When West Ham go down and the easy move is to escape, Carrick stays for that season in the second tier and performs at such a level he's named in the PFA First Division Team of the Year 2003-2004. That's not a vibe award, that's the league telling you this player is controlling matches at the highest level of that division. So by the time he's ready to leave, the Carrick identity is already clear. He can absorb adversity without changing personality. He can manage tempo in ugly games, not just beautiful ones. He can handle responsibility without the need to be seen handling it. That's the first layer of what makes him Ferguson ready. In 2004, Tottenham signed Carrick from West Ham, widely reported at around £3.5 million, and the Tottenham chapter is where Carrick's reputation shifts from promising to Premier League organiser, because his start isn't perfect. Under Jacques Santine, Carrick isn't immediately treated like the centrepiece. There are doubts, hesitations, rotation decisions that tell you the club is still figuring out what it has. Then Martin Jol arrives, and suddenly Carrick becomes the kind of midfielder managers build systems around. He plays regularly, he dictates, he starts doing the thing that will later define him at Manchester United, keeping the team connected through passing, not sideways for safety, but to control where the game is going next. Spurs become the bridge between academy intelligence and elite level control. It's where Carrick learns how to organise a Premier League match, how to slow it down, speed it up, and make chaos feel like a schedule. So when people later act surprised that Sir Alex Ferguson wanted him, they're missing the point. Sir Alex Ferguson wasn't buying a highlight player, he was buying a structure. And by the end of Carrick's Spurs rise, a midfielder who can control games without dominating headlines, the most important pair of eyes in English football had noticed. Sir Alex Ferguson noticed. And once Sir Alex Ferguson notices a player like that, the story stops being about potential. It becomes about destiny.
In the summer of 2006, when Sir Alex Ferguson decided to replace Roy Keane, Manchester United didn't go shopping for another warrior, he went shopping for a brain. On 31st July 2006, United completed the signing of Michael Carrick from Tottenham for a fee reported at £14 million, potentially rising to £18.6 million. The shirt, number 16, Keane's old number. The symbolism was obvious. The profile was anything but. Carrick wasn't bought for crunching tackles, box office personality, or highlight reels. He was bought for balance, structure, passing range, and tactical discipline. Ferguson was clear about why. He later described Carrick as one of the cleverest players he ever managed, praising his range and his ability to switch play, and argued that the very casualness in his game was what caused people to constantly underestimate him. This wasn't a transfer to energise headlines, it was a transfer to stabilise a dynasty. Carrick's first Premier League season tells you everything about Ferguson's instincts. United reclaim the title with 89 points, their first in 4 years. Carrick makes 33 league appearances, scores 3 goals, but the numbers that matter aren't goals, they're rhythm. The midfield quietly evolves. Instead of the all-action chaos of earlier years, United begin leaning into a more continental control model. Carrick sits, Scholes roams slightly higher, tempo becomes calculated, and you could see the shift most clearly in Europe. By 2007-08, United aren't just powerful, they're composed. In the Champions League final against Chelsea in Moscow, Carrick plays the full 120 minutes and converts his penalty in the shootout as United win 6-5. That night mattered because it validated everything Ferguson had seen. Carrick was never the headline in that side. Ronaldo and Rooney drew all the eyes, but tactically he was the hinge. Without him, United's shape loses its structure entirely. Between 2006 and 2013, Carrick helped deliver 5 Premier League titles, a Champions League, an FA Cup and multiple League Cups. In total, 316 Premier League appearances, 464 in all competitions. He was never the noise, he was the glue. Carrick's embodiment, what you might call the Ferguson code. Read the game early, control the rhythm rather than just the ball, and do it without demanding credit. The 2012-13 season is the clearest proof of how valued he really was. He plays 36 league games as United win the title by 11 points, earns a place in the PFA Team of the Year, and wins Manchester United's Players' Player of the Year. Recognition from the teammates who understood exactly what they gave them every single week. Arsene Wenger once said Carrick could have played for Barcelona because of his passing intelligence. Pep Guardiola called him one of the best holding midfielders he'd seen. And yet for England, he won only 34 caps because the national conversation was always dominated by Gerrard and Lampard, louder personalities with more visible goal returns. Carrick didn't offer bravado, he offered balance. And balance rarely trends. If 2008 was validation, 2009 was the wound. United returned to the Champions League final, this time facing Barcelona in Rome, and lose 2-0. Later, Carrick admitted that defeat affected him deeply. In 2018, he revealed he had quietly struggled with depression for nearly 2 years following that night in Rome. That confession reframes his entire career. Behind the calm exterior was someone carrying real disappointment, processing it privately, and still turning up week after week to anchor a team chasing more titles. Not noise, glue. During injury crises, Ferguson and later managers trusted Carrick as an emergency centre-back, and that trust says everything. Managers don't shift midfielders into defence unless they're certain that player understands space, angles and risk at a level most others simply don't. Carrick did. It was further proof that his value was never visible, it was structural. In 2018, Carrick retires. No media tour, no grand managerial manifesto. He steps straight into coaching at United under Mourinho and stays on under Solskjaer. The pattern is immediately clear. He doesn't leap, he learns. Then November 2021 arrives. Solskjaer departs and Carrick steps in as caretaker. 3 matches, a 2-0 win at Villarreal to secure Champions League qualification, a 1-1 draw at Chelsea, and a 3-2 win over Arsenal. Unbeaten, measured, calm. When Ralf Rangnick is appointed interim manager, Carrick leaves the club voluntarily. No lobbying, no campaign, no power play, just dignity. He walks away unbeaten, and that exit says more about him than any trophy lift ever could, because the student hadn't finished studying yet. And when the time came again, when Old Trafford needed structure more than slogans, the quiet brain Ferguson once signed would be ready. He would be back.
Middlesbrough wasn't supposed to be the next step. Not for a Champions League winner. Not for a man who'd spent 12 years inside the most demanding dressing room in England. Not for someone still spoken about at Old Trafford like a quiet piece of architecture. Always there, always holding the place up. But that's exactly why it mattered. Because if Michael Carrick was ever going to become more than Ferguson's smartest student, he needed a lab, a place where the training wheels came off, where decisions weren't theoretical and the consequences weren't shared. And when he walked into the Riverside in late October 2022, he wasn't inheriting a project, he was inheriting a problem. When Carrick took charge, Borough were sitting in 21st and drifting toward a genuine relegation conversation. The club didn't hire him for vibes, they hired him because the squad needed clarity, roles, patterns, a repeatable identity. And almost immediately, the Carrick profile as a coach revealed itself. Not chaos, not a new manager bounce built on emotion, but organisation disguised as calm. The early run was electric. Carrick's side won 16 of his first 23 games in charge. That's not a purple patch, that's a structure landing fast. Opta's breakdown of his Borough work shows that after taking over, he won 13 of his first 17 matches, lifting them right into contention near the top end of the table by mid-February. What actually changed? Positional discipline without becoming passive, ball progression with a purpose rather than keeping it for the sake of it, attacking spacing that gave players simple pictures, where the next pass should go, where the third man run should come from, where the counter should explode. The most revealing detail is that his best Middlesbrough season tactically wasn't the most complete one, it was the first one, because it showed what happens when Carrick gets a squad to buy into his principles quickly. Then reality hit. Results slowed late in the season and Borough finished 4th, losing to Coventry in the playoffs. That rise then wobble matters, because it tells you what Carrick was building, not a one-off run, a template. Carrick's second campaign wasn't the smooth climb people romanticize, it was the part every manager eventually gets graded on. Can your style survive fatigue, injuries, expectation, and opponents who've adapted to you? The cup run gave us the perfect snapshot. Middlesbrough reached the Carabao Cup semi-finals, winning the first leg 1-0 against Chelsea, a proper statement under the lights. Then came the second leg, Chelsea 6-1, 6-2 on aggregate. Brutal. But here's the key. That tie didn't disprove Carrick, it defined the gap between a well-drilled championship side and a high-talent Premier League squad that punishes tiny errors without mercy. That's not failure, that's data. And in management, data is gold if you're willing to learn from it rather than hide from it. By the summer of 2025, Middlesbrough parted ways with Carrick after the club finished 10th in the Championship, 4th in his first season, then 8th, then 10th. The club chose to reset. But for Carrick personally, Middlesbrough did something priceless. It turned the student into an author. Because now he had a style he'd tested under real pressure, scars from games where the margins punished him, and a blueprint that belonged entirely to him, not to the badges on his CV. And that's why what happened next feels almost inevitable in hindsight. On a January evening in 2026, Manchester United officially brought back Michael Carrick as head coach until the end of the season. Not a romantic reunion, a crisis response with a familiar face who understood the club's internal language better than almost anyone alive. And then the results arrived quickly. He won his first 4 matches, Manchester City, Arsenal, Fulham, Tottenham, then kept the unbeaten run alive with a late equaliser at West Ham. 5 games in, unbeaten, and Old Trafford was starting to feel something it hadn't felt in a while. Then came Everton, late in February. Not a highlight reel performance, one of those matches where the stadium feels heavy, the duels are constant, the ball doesn't run clean, and the game seems to be waiting for someone to make a mistake. United didn't blink. 1-0 win, Benjamin Šeško on the counter. Carrick called it a great win, tough, physical, gritty, and admitted it's still early days and not yet perfect. Analysts covering match week 27 described it as a bruising, low-quality game where United stole the points not by being brilliant, but by being settled, simple, and ruthless on the break. That's Carrick as a coach in one line, not chasing chaos, weaponizing clarity. And there it was again, the Ferguson fingerprint. Professional, efficient, emotionally controlled, not glamorous, grown up. This is where the numbers get specific because they tell you exactly how he's doing it. A tactical breakdown comparing Carrick's first 5 games to Ruben Amorim's 20 earlier this season found almost double the number of direct attacks per game, 50% more fast breaks, plus 21 passes into the final third per 90, and more high turnovers, 8.4 per game versus 8.2 previously. That is not nostalgia, that is a measurable shift in behaviour. United are going forward earlier, they're winning the ball back higher up the pitch, they're replacing sterile possession with moments where one pass flips the entire game, and Carrick is doing all of it without pretending it's 2008. The core adjustments scream Ferguson education without copying Ferguson's teams. Identity first, system second. The point isn't a fancy shape, it's the type of attacks United are choosing: directness, tempo, verticality. One change sits at the centre of it all, moving Bruno Fernandes into a true number 10 role to create moments, reducing his defensive burden and letting others carry the engine room work. And above all else, settle the team, simplify the asks, and let talent decide games. That last principle is the faithful student element, not copying Ferguson's old sides, but copying the principle Ferguson lived by. By the time the Everton win was confirmed, Carrick was 6 matches unbeaten in this run. Across both his United caretaker spells combined, still unbeaten in any competition, 9 matches overall, a start bettered only twice in club history, Bamlett with 10, Solskjaer with 11. And the supporting character the numbers keep pointing to is Šeško, whose late goals off the bench have been decisive, joint most substitute goals in the Premier League this season, with 3. That's not trivia, that's the point. Carrick isn't winning through theatre, he's winning through repeatable mechanisms, settled structure, counter-attacks, bench impact, game state management. The kind of stuff that keeps working when the noise gets louder. There's a question forming at Old Trafford, not whispered, not shouted, just building. Is Carrick a stabiliser or something far more consequential? Ferguson didn't just leave a system, he left standards, rhythm, a psychological identity. Carrick speaks that language fluently. He lived inside it for 12 years, not just in the dressing room, but part of its control system. So we leave it here, without certainty, without coronation, just tension. Is Carrick the most faithful student of Ferguson's dynasty, or the first manager since 2013 who actually knows how to rebuild it? Maybe the shy boy didn't disappear, he just learned the system better than anyone else in the room.